The due diligence checklist. You may have seen this at open houses or even on the internet, but this is a tool to make sure you've considered all of the important factors that you need to before buying a house. Buying a house is not as easy as writing the check and then moving straight in. So, the due diligence checklist allows us to consider all the issues, obligations, and restrictions that may apply to the property that we want to buy. Now, you have to consider what type of area do you want to move into. Firstly, we have the inner city. The inner city is attractive for people who love their service and entertainment, but this also means increased traffic as well as noise and odors from businesses and people. Secondly, we have the suburbs. Many new suburbs don't have the infrastructure or public transport you may be used to, so you need to consider whether the suburbs provide you with what you need. Furthermore, in many growth areas, you may be asked to give an infrastructure contribution to help develop the infrastructure, which is more money out of your pocket. And finally, maybe you want to move into a rural property, otherwise known as the countryside. If you're looking at a property in the countryside, you need to ask yourself a bunch of questions. Some people love the idea of living on a farm until they actually have to live on a farm hours away from many of their family and friends. Firstly, you have to ask yourself, is the surrounding land use compatible with your lifestyle expectations? Farming can create noise and odors that may be at odds with your expectations of a rural lifestyle. Secondly, do you understand the obligations to manage weeds and pest animals which is necessary when living in the country? Essentially, are you up for the responsibility of maintaining a rural property, as property upkeep in the country is a lot different to property maintenance in the suburbs. Some other risks you need to consider with rural properties is bushfire and flood risk, and will that affect your area, and if so, are you willing to deal with the preparations that come with that? Something else to think about is whether or not you can actually build on your property. Some areas and suburbs have restrictions on what you can and can't do on your property, such as renovations or additions. Make sure you know the exact boundary of your property because you don't want to build a new gazebo and then realize your neighbor owns half of it. You should compare the measurements on your title document with the actual fences and buildings on your property. If you're unsure about this, you can check with a lawyer or a conveyancer, or even conduct a site survey to ensure that all the measurements match. Check if the previous land use affected the soil or groundwater. This includes things such as mining and landfill. Make sure the past activities, including the use of adjacent land, have not caused contamination at your property. Otherwise, you may be restricted from doing many things with your land in the future. Planning controls. Like we said before, certain areas have certain restrictions. Ensure you know the limits of what you can and can't do on your property, especially if you have future plans. Planning schemes and zoning schemes, which are determined by the council, also greatly affect what you can and can't do with your property, so ensure that you're buying a property in the right zoning scheme. For example, the most obvious case of this is that land zoned for industrial use can't have residential properties on it. Zoning, therefore, can restrict many things, such as whether you can build on vacant land, or how you can alter or develop the land, or even a building over time. The local council can give you advice and additional information about the planning or zoning schemes in your area. They can also give you other information about additional restrictions, such as design guidelines and bushfire safety design. Your property itself may have certain restrictions known as encumbrances on the property's title, which prevents you from developing the property. You can find out more about your encumbrances on your property from a Section 32 statement, which you can get from your agent or vendor. Also ask if there are any proposed or granted planning permits for your property or the properties around you. The last thing you want to do is move into your dream house and then a huge apartment building gets built right next door. So you can ask your agent or the local council for any proposed or granted building permits in your area. Significant developments can have a big effect on the vibe of the community as well as your property's value. Building permits. Now, before you buy a property, you should check with the vendor or the owner about any retaining walls or buildings that have been added and whether or not these are permitted. The local council may be able to give you information about any building permits issued for recent building works done to the property and what you must do if you plan to do some new work. You can also commission a private building surveyor to see if all the works done on the property are legit and have permits attached to them. They can also tell you if your property is suitable for other future adaptations. If the property does have any recent additions, buildings or renovation work done, check if they are covered by insurance. Also ask the vendor if there's any owner-builder's insurance or builder's warranty on any new works done in the house recently. You don't want to be on the hook for any new or recent renos which collapsed due to defects in the work. Safety. Now, this one seems pretty obvious, but make sure the building that you're buying is safe. Building laws are in place to ensure that buildings are safe, but some people still do dodgy work and take shortcuts on renovations or additions. So you can get a professional building inspector to assess your property for any bad electrical work, any illegal pool, illegal additions, asbestos, termites, and all the other different defects for a building. Utilities and essential services. Now this is an important one. Does your property have working connections to internet, water, gas, or electricity? You don't want to move into an area and then realize you have no water, gas, or worse, no internet. Some services may not be available or may incur a fee to connect, so be aware of this and prepare for it. You may also need to choose from a range of suppliers for these services, which is particularly important as rural areas have restrictions on what services are available. Your buyer's rights. Most importantly, know your rights. You don't want to get stuck buying a bad property or a property that doesn't fit your lifestyle. There are many organizations and rules here to protect you and your interests. Furthermore, you can check the contract of sale or the Section 32 statement for all relevant information on the sale. If you're a little bit unsure, you can check with a lawyer or a conveyancer to help you better understand these documents and to ensure the sale goes through correctly. Now, don't worry, you are not being naggy or annoying if you request this information. You're well within your rights. Make sure you speak to a professional before you commit to buying a house which is worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Overall, just make sure you get the property that you really want. The due diligence checklist is just here to make sure you don't get ripped off or taken advantage of in the buying process.